Okay, let's jump right into this. In today's explainer, we're going to unpack something that is truly fascinating, but honestly deeply unsettling. We're looking at a grim, gothic fable that examines the very words we're using right now. Imagine a world where the familiar, comfortable language we speak every single day isn't a tool for connection at all, but rather a terrifying structural trap. It's a story where the boundary between the self and the alien completely collapses. We're going to explore how etymological shifts can transform familiar speech into incredibly alien experiences, literally turning the tongue itself into a physical prison.
Think about it. When we picture a monster, we almost always imagine a stranger at the door, right? Some invader from the outside. But this fable plunges us straight into the abyss by revealing that the monster is already inside the house. In fact, it's hiding inside our very mother tongue. The true horror isn't what is alien to us, it's what is most familiar to us, suddenly stripping off its mask.
Section 1. The Threshold of Home.
So, picture this. You have village elders gathered around a fire. They recognize the shape and rhythm of a cozy hearth song, but as they listen, the meaning just slips away, and they are horrified to realize the tune has become a sudden funeral hymn. A single shifted vowel curdles the German word heimlich, meaning home or familiar, into unheimlich, the uncanny or alien. Just a tiny grammatical drift completely estranges the speaker from their own identity. It's this terrifying dialectic where the self, the familiar I, is suddenly confronted by the alien not I, hiding right there within its own voice. Estrangement doesn't arrive in strange armor. It dresses itself up in the comfortable clothing of home. Neighbors look at each other and suddenly no longer recognize their native tongue.
And the truly terrifying realization here is that the familiar and the uncanny aren't actually opposites. They are the exact same word, just turned inside out. This concept, the Limmenheimlich, isn't just some psychological return of the repressed, it's a philological one. The literal laws of sound and grammar are working on speech in the exact same way that old buried trauma works on human memory. The comforting song and the alien funeral hymn were always sharing a single throat.
Section 2. Exhuming the Buried Root.
We usually think of looking up a word's origin as a discovery, right? A way to find a pure, clean, original definition. But here, framing etymology as an exhumation shifts meaning into a dangerous trap rather than a bridge to understanding. There is a deep Nietzschean connection in this fable. Tracing words back to their ancient roots absolutely does not reveal a pure origin. Instead, it uncovers a buried history of use, of violence, and of forgetting. The minstrel singing the Stark song is essentially performing a horrific excavation. Which brings us to the frankly terrifying concept of cadaver radices, the corpse of the root. When the minstrel in our fable traces verbs backward through dead centuries, he doesn't find a clean first meaning. No, he finds a forgotten corpse at the bottom of the word, still twitching with old grammar. And the real horror? Dead syllables don't stay dead. They are resurrected every single time the minstrel sings them. Tracing a word backward like this turns a standard genealogical method into pure folk horror. It starts ordinarily enough at a modern dinner table, but as it's tracked into centuries past, it acts exactly like a repressed memory resurfacing. Finally, at its ancient origin, we see that historical trauma does not actually decay in language. It doesn't just disappear, it merely changes its grammatical declension. The trauma just takes on a new tense.
Section 3. The Magistrate's Second Silence.
Now, we have a deeply Heideggerian view of language anchoring this moment in the fable. The philosopher Martin Heidegger famously said, "Language speaks." In our story, the town's magistrate embodies the law, the office where human words are assumed to have the absolute most binding power over reality. The magistrate truly, deeply believes he wields language as a tool to pronounce his sentences and exert his human agency. But when the magistrate tries to pass judgment and stop the uncanny song, the fable delivers a horrific punchline. He reaches for strings of authority that simply never existed. His voice comes from somewhere way older than himself. He means to speak the town's judgment into being, but instead, the town's judgment literally transforms his fingers into stiff wood. This right here is the essence of instrumentum loquens, the speaking instrument. The parable severely punishes the magistrate's assumption of human agency. It punishes him twice, actually. First, by freezing his hand into a wooden instrument, and second, by borrowing his throat. It proves that the man who thought he was pronouncing the sentence was all along merely its grammar. Language requires a literal human offering, completely merging the speaker's anatomy with the instrument of their own entrapment. Section 4. Architecture of the cage. Traditionally, we rely on the Johani Logos, the ancient scripture where in the beginning was the Word, and that Word built and sustained the entire world. But this fable presents a terrifying inversion of that, the Logos reversed. Here, the deeper you delve into the origins of speech, the more you invite the destruction of the present world. The word doesn't create anymore. It actively consumes and unravels the speaker.
Because meaning isn't just descriptive here, it is literally load-bearing. The syntax of the final verse in the minstrel song isn't a record of the town's fate. It is the very scaffolding that locks the town in place. It's a curse built not out of broken, chaotic magic, but out of perfectly correct structural grammar. The grammar becomes the literal physical architecture of a silent prison.
Section 5. Total linguistic nihilism. And that brings us to the ultimate horror, furtum nominis, or the theft of the name. Stopping an action, silencing a verb, is merely a stopped clock, but stealing a noun, that is something else entirely. Erasing the referential apparatus destroys the very ground we stand on. Total linguistic nihilism isn't achieved by stopping people from doing things. It's achieved by taking away the names of the things they are experiencing.
The consequences of this are devastating. The villagers in our fables still feel the wound, but without nouns, the referential apparatus is just gone. In a Fichtean sense, the self is entirely obliterated. It can no longer define itself against its own pain. Grief absolutely requires a noun to stand upon before it can be spoken out loud. Without a name to hold it, the pain can no longer be located. The sufferers can't even witness their own wounds internally. They are completely unable to define their own personal suffering, utterly consumed by the grammar of the uncanny. The result is what we could call an epilogue of echoes. The terrible quiet that falls over the town does not follow the song. It is the song's afterlife. It's a silence still performing an ending, but with absolutely no names left to end. It's not the silence of peace. It's the total vacancy of a world where expression has been entirely stripped away. It leaves us with a truly chilling realization. Our ability to process trauma, to understand our own pain, and to even exist as conscious individuals depends entirely on a fragile and sometimes alien grammar. So ask yourself, if your nouns were stolen today, where would your suffering live? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer.